Exactly.
Hello, everyone.
Greetings.
Russ, did you get my slides?
I did not see your slides.
Oh,
I do now. All right, let me upload those.
are you going to?
Yes, I was just putting doing the preload thing. So let me do that for yours. All right, we're a little bit past time, so let's get going. There's a couple people I thought would be here who are not, but at the same time, I don't want to waste everyone else's time. So we scheduled this session, lamps, for today, and we have just one agenda topic, which is the EST CSR attributes. But before we get to that, I need to make sure that you're aware of the note well. So basically, please make sure that you're aware of all of these things. If you're going to contribute, make sure what you're promising to do and promising not to do. So I have slides from Daniel and Michael. Dan, I think I'm going to start with your slides and then move to Mike's. Does that meet the expectations of the presenters?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn off my video and let Dan take it away.
Okay, thank you. So next slide, please. So there was some discussion on the list about what CSR attributes are, the whole point of them is, and they got added to EST because it seemed like there's a lot of variables that need to get settled when issuing a cert, and it was at least our understanding that if a client assumed a setting that the CA didn't like, that it would probably result in not issuing the certificate, and that would be kind of a pain to diagnose. So some of the biggest things that we identified were, which crypto system do you want to use when you generate your key? If it's ECC, then which curve, and if it's RSA, how big a key. So you don't want the client generating 1024-bit keys if the CA is only going to sign 2048 and larger. Similarly, there were things like, perhaps they want a particular hash algorithm used depending upon the crypto system, and there may be other things that the CA might want or the RA might want. So the goal is to match the structure of the CSR, the certificate, as much as possible, but of course that isn't exactly what happened. But it does have attributes, and it has standalone OIDs. So it's a sequence of attributes and OIDs. So next slide, please. So this is being used in a couple of places, and it's not a coincidence that these are all the places where I seem to have my fingers involved. But DPP, the device provisioning protocol, supports issuing X509 certs to things that it's provisioning, and the way it decides on how to issue certs is it basically just we copied the CSR attribute stuff from EST, and the interpretation of CSR attributes that at least I had that was in EST. So DPP does this, and of course EST does this. My reference implementation supports a pretty complete parsing of everything that I thought was relevant to a CSR. So next slide, please. That said, there's some debate about what we have and whether it's good enough or we need to change it. I don't like ASN.1, and I don't want to defend the current ASN.1, but it does seem to be somewhere between simple and rather incomprehensible. So I would come down somewhere in the middle of that spectrum in my analysis of this ASN.1. It is underspecified and kind of free form. That's admitted, and it is possible to give conflicting recommendations. So you could tell somebody to encrypt with RSA encrypt or sign with RSA encryption and tell them to use a ECC key. So yes, it is possible to speak garbage that is not prevented. So it does seem like there's some desire to use the CSR attributes in ways that at least I didn't think that they would be used. For instance, having the RA tell the client what his alternate name is and to put that alternate name into the CSR that's being generated. So there is that new work, I guess. Next slide, I've got a couple of examples of how this stuff works. We can just quickly run through it so people can take a look at what I'm talking about. But next slide. So, if the example is, the CA signs with P384 and he probably wants to issue the same, then it's probably best to sign with SHA-384. And if the RA wants to get challenge password and some additional information about the client, he would generate this base64 encoded ASN.1 blob, which decodes like this. It's a sequence of an OID for challenge password, followed by an object, which is EC public key using P384. And then there's another attribute of an extension request that has 3 sets in there. One is it's requesting a serial number, a subject alternative name, and the device's favorite drink, and to sign the whole thing with SHA-384. So next slide. So that would produce a CSR like that. I generated this the other day with my DPP implementation just to give an example. So the device I was provisioning was called Biff, so that's his name. And this is the CSR that he produced based upon those CSR attributes. Next slide. And that's the cert that ends up getting generated by the CA I have here. I snipped out the signature and the public key because it basically filled up the screen. But this is basically how at least I was interpreting to handle all of those attributes, how they ended up in the certificate based upon the request from the RA. So that's it. End of slide deck.
Any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I have a horrible echo. Sorry. All right, Michael, I'll move to your slides.
Hi. Oh, we can hear you now. That's interesting. It tells you whether it can hear you. Hi. So RC8994, which is the autonomic control plane, in which Torless is the lead author, and 8995, which is Brewski, work together to do enrollment for new devices. So I see Max on the call as well, who's also an 8995 author and a 7030 author. And so for those of you who don't know a lot about it, I put a bunch of links here that would probably help you a little bit to get more familiar, but I don't propose to go a great deal into that. Next slide, please. So the big thing about the autonomic control plane is that after a great discussion, we have an other name that we use for in our subject alt name, and it has some structure in it. Specifically, it happens to encode an IPv6. Well, it's actually a prefix, not just an address, and provide some context in the form of a domain name, which is used in a couple places. And that address is in fact used to configure addresses on the devices, mostly in the case of 8994, we're talking about enterprise ISP routers. So big and small iron that would be drop shipped to locations. There are some IoT uses of Brewski where the this other name form is not used, but in some cases they would like to put a specific DNS name, which is under the control of the registrar in it. And so we, in the document, I think next slide, please, this said, well, we should, we should put this in the CSR attributes. And that's what we understood from doing it. And this is a little close up as to what it's supposed to look like. And we wrote some code, and we seem to have interoperated at least with a few people, but obviously not with Dan, because we would have figured that out immediately. Next slide, please. So what does our CSR attribute look like? Well, this is what it looks like. Subject alt name. There's probably an OID that actually doesn't say other name, but rather DNS name, but I didn't fix this example. That's what we kind of came up with from what we were reading of 7030 ASN1. That's what we thought we were doing. So obviously it was wrong. And the resulting CSR, next slide, it looks like that, right? UTF string in the right-hand side there. So that's a little bit too hard to see. And we get a certificate out of that has the right thing from it. And I guess I'll point out that the CSR is pretty much the only interface to some CAs, which, for instance, that use 8555, which is the Acme Let's Encrypt kind of process. So if you are going that direction, you only have a CSR and you can't do anything else. At least there's nothing standard. Next slide, please. So the options as we kind of see it, right, is one is 7030's it was intended to do what we want, and Dan says that's not the case. But that's one option. We could fix it to include something like what we want and continue on. We could extend it to do something else in some other way using ASN1. This could be a different call. It could be a different attributes, could be something else. We could do number 3, which at one point I think Elliot was, discussing when this came up with that. Couldn't we do something based upon JSON, because his developers were having a hard time trying to make this stuff work in the current library, and it didn't appear that they could do what he wanted. I didn't have any library when I implemented CSR attributes. I had to basically, manipulate ASN1 objects from underneath from OpenSSL, and so I didn't have anything to go against. That was wrong. I basically validated I could run the examples in the 7030 and went from there. So another possibility is we could have 89, 95, 90, 94, 95, just do something else that's very specific to our environment, and not try and create any kind of a JSON or CBOR update to 7030 for others. In that case, I suppose we do whatever we like, and we could ignore the rest of you. And I think that was my last slide.
Okay, so my expectation is that we will be spending the rest of the meeting deciding which of these ways to go.
Right. That's
Okay.
that's why I think we need a meeting, is that I think that we need to at least agree on which ones we don't want to do. And I think we need to figure out, of the choices, which ones people prefer, and recognizing that this is clearly errata on 8994 and 8995 already. So whoever's next in the queue, go ahead.
Right. Dan, you're first.
Thanks. Michael, can you explain how you see 1 and 2 being different, or could they be the same option?
So
what's the difference between 1 and 2?
Number 1 is the ASN1 in the document is wrong, and you clearly intended my interpretation, but the ASN1 did not express that. Now you've just told us that's not the case. So that's what number 1 is. Number 2 is, well, you hadn't thought the ASN1 is correct, but we could trivially extend it to include my interpretation.
Okay, so the ASN.1 and 7030 is not correct? Is that?
No, I'm not claiming an opinion one way or the other. What I'm
okay.
saying is that it could be that the ASN1 that you put in the document does not actually reflect what your understanding or your intent was.
Oh,
right?
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay, and so you intended to include my use case, but the ASN1 did not include that case. Number two is the ASN1 clearly expresses your intent, and your intent was exactly as it's done, but we could extend it to do something new.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
You're up. Torlis, it's your turn.
Hey, yeah. So I'm trying to wrap my head around Dan's presentation, right? And so I think I didn't get from the presentation any proof to, what is really intended from 7030 from the spec, right? Which is why obviously we got to where we are with Anima, right? And just the point that other systems like DPP are doing a different set of things in CSR ETRA. Just I mean, they did what they wanted to have, and I don't think that proves by itself that other uses of CSR ETRA are prohibited. And I also don't think that there was any showing of why what Anima does would do harm. I don't even see a big difference in what Dan claims to be appropriate for CSR ETRA to include about the certificates to be appropriate for enrollment in terms of the crypto parameters, for example. That is significantly different from what we're doing. So that's why I'm kind of overall quite puzzled by the whole context here.
Okay, Dan, do you want to respond to that, or should I move to the next person in queue?
Well, I just wrote in the chat that I'm if anyone is thinking that I'm opposed to what Brewski was doing, I'm not. I was just trying to explain at least what I thought we were doing when we wrote 7030. But that's, clearly if there is another use for this, then I'm completely on board with either one or two, depending upon what the group wants to do.
Elliot?
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to those where it is still morning. So there were two problems that we ran into. The first, when we're looking at this, and there's sort of a number 5 that probably we need to at least discuss. Problem number 1, as I mentioned in the chat, was that clients were having difficulty implementing CSR attributes. And I realized we said we're not going to quite scope the work for today for that, but I don't want to I don't want to understate the library issue, because we don't have control of the clients often, and so they're using high-level languages. The high-level languages don't have expressions for CSR attributes. They end up having to bring in rather large additional libraries to parse ASN1. They do a poor job of it. This is one issue that we have. The second problem that we had was more around just our own understanding of how to get values in. And so we can, if we do number 1, which is fine, Dan had also a perfectly fine suggestion that we should investigate, which I think you posted it yesterday, your time, Dan, which is to explore the possibility of a side channel for between the RA and the CA to add additional information. I replied to that note indicating that there might be points in time where you want to do one or the other, and there are some challenges with the side channel, but I do think it's worth at least having the discussion if we can get the right people in the room. And I apologize, I'll need to disappear for 5 minutes at the top, 5-10 minutes at the top of the hour, and then I'll be back.
Max?
Greetings. I think I'm falling in along with lines of Torlis here, in that my understanding and recollection from the section we're really talking about from 7030, where we're indicating CSR attributes, there's multiple paragraphs here where we're indicating the ability to indicate to the client specifics, and there is, as it is underspecified, but it clearly indicates CSR attributes response should reflect the structure of the CSR that it is hoping to get back. And in the example of crypto algorithms, et cetera, what we're doing is we're sending information down to the client and saying, use this information to form your response. And so that seems consistent with the conversation here. And so I would lean towards, there's some points in number 3, which is to say that there's clearly some misunderstandings about how to create and parse the CSR attributes, and I agree that we can clarify a lot of that. But I'm not seeing a real conflict so much as some work to be done to clarify that a little bit. To the point that was just made about an out-of-band, I don't have any problems with that. I don't have any preference towards it either, so I kind of don't care. But I feel like part of this all comes back around to the ASN1 and confusions about how it looks, and so maybe that's a way forward, is kind of towards that rethinking of it, if there's actually a problem here. Frankly, I'm not sure I see the problem, though. Thank you.
So what I think Max just said is that a clarification document that updates 7030 and explains how to use the existing syntax for both as Dan has described and as Brewski has been using it, would be a way forward. Is that correct?
Thank you for fixing my language. Yes, that would be correct.
Does anyone think that's not the way forward? I'd really like to hear from anyone who thinks that.
So it's not clear that it helps Elliot's issue with library support, but I guess with that clarifying document, it might be easier to get libraries to implement the right thing rather than having to code it directly in their client.
Max, then Elliot.
I'm thinking that way as well. I'm not seeing a conflict, just confusion, and so clarification resolves that without going to the greater extents that have been proposed. So yes, I think that approach works, unless there's a conflict I missed.
And I'll just add that I think the problems are the library problems I mentioned are severable. We should definitely do the clarification if we can get, with a lot of good examples, and then I can work on the library problems separately.
Okay, Torlis. Torlis, if you're talking, you're muted.
That's my best friend.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, I was saying that, can you clarify what you exactly mean with clarification documents? So, update or non-update to 7030, standard or informational?
I was thinking about a document that is an update and is at the same track as 7030 itself, which I believe is a proposed standard.
Right. Yeah. So I don't disagree with any of these options. I just fear that when we go to an update on the standards track of 7030, then I wonder if people want to chime into other things as well. So kind of keeping the work scoped.
Right.
That's always one of those.
No, there's always the problem that once you have the patient open, somebody says, "Hey, while we're in there," yeah. But hopefully, we can keep the scope to getting this one thing clarified so that we can get everybody moving in the same direction. Deb?
I like the idea to track it through the update, because otherwise implementers would need it anyhow.
Deb, you're breaking up a bit, but we do hear you.
Somebody else. Maybe my board or something. So in fact, there are things that need to be fixed in 7030, unfortunately. Referencing TLS 1.1, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, and can you hear me now? Pardon?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Deb is working for any of us. Your audio is completely messed up. Can you try to dial in again, different browser or something? I don't think I'm the only one. Others were chiming in on the chat.
Yeah, your voice quality was very bad, but your point was there's some things related to TLS versions that also need to be updated. We're waiting for Deb to get audio. Max, you want to go?
Commented in the chat session as well, so she might just be typing at this point. I think that I like the point of just clarifying this one issue. There are other and plenty of other issues, but I like the input that maintaining focus would be useful.
Okay. So Deb, you're not going to come back, but your hand's still up. Torlis?
Sorry, mute buttons is always slow. Yeah, so I think with respect to TLS, I think I wouldn't have an issue of updating it to include the obsolescence of 1.1, but in Anima we had also the very long debate about the mandate of 1.3 versus because we're a lot in the embedded environment, and libraries and hardware bound software very often are still only 1.2. So that's something I'd be worried about if we would go away from the only mandatory to implement being 1.2 for EST.
Doubt that TLS has not deprecated 1.2 yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be in line with them to say 1.2 or higher.
Yep, okay.
Max?
Sorry, I didn't have anything to comment. I've taken my hand down.
Okay. Michael?
It sounded like Deb was suggesting what might be there's a whole bunch of other fixes in 7030 that some people would like to do, and so that kind of gets into the 7030 BIS, which I think is probably okay, maybe not a whole bunch, she says, but just that one. Okay. We already did update it once with one document, so I think that we could write a reasonable, 5 to 12 page CSR attributes and examples document, and I think that would be fine. I would have thought the text says, TLS 1.1 or better, and maybe we don't need to fix that so badly. But anyway, I think there are lots of other places that could be fixed, but I think that the right answer is just an updates document, and that's it. And I don't think we should try to go beyond that point.
I don't hear anybody speaking against an update that clarifies CSR adders. Do I have some volunteers to be authors of this document?
Yes.
Okay, so I heard Michael's willing to do that. I'm jumping over to chat, and Dan says he'll contribute. And Mike points out in chat that 7030 has already been updated by RFC 8996, deprecating TLS1 and 11. Okay, so I think Michael and Dan are going to take the lead on the document, and I think I guess I want to know with Roman, do you think this requires a recharter? My guess is it does not, but I want your assessment now before we send you the other recharter stuff.
Yeah, with apologies for joining late, time zones conspired against me. I thought we had a 2 o'clock meeting here in the eastern part of the U.S. Yeah, this is small enough and narrow. I don't think we need to include this in the next charter.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're done unless somebody has any other business they wanted to raise today. Awesome. Thank you all. Let's go ahead and wrap this up then. And thank you very much, Deb, for taking the minutes.
All right. Thank you all.